This is the Afterwork Garage. So this little 4-horse Yamaha, it's been about 5 years since I've used it, and the entire time it's been sitting around in various shops. Thought it'd be a nice one to throw on a boat and take out on a trip in a few days, and thought I'd get it set up and make sure it still runs. Alright, we've got a problem. So, other than the fact that there's no fuel hooked up, the pull start seems to be seized. And first thing I'd want to check is to make sure it's not in gear. So this would be in forward gear, reverse. Forward's kind of hard. There we go, forward gear, neutral, reverse. You want to make sure it's neutral because there's a little lockup here that prevents the handle. If I put it in reverse, I can't pull the handle anywhere. But that's not the case, and it's totally locked up. So I have a suspicion of what's going on. Since it's a 4-stroke motor, I'm pretty sure that the oil has seeped past the piston rings and has hydrolocked this motor. So we definitely have oil in here, but we're going to have to go ahead and clear out that hydrolock before we can get it started. Okay, so I was being a little theatrical with the opening there, and I'd already taken this motor out and seen that it was seized up. Now, if you can look on the corner here, you see this label that gives very specific instructions on which side to lay the motor down on if you can't store it vertically, and that's on the side of the handle. The reason it does this is because if you store it on the other side, all of the oil in the crankcase is going to be tipped so that it's facing the back of the piston, and then it'll seep through the piston rings or around the piston rings and into the combustion chamber. And I suspect, even though I've really tried to keep it on that side during storage, that's what's happened anyways. And well, air and other gases are compressible, fluids are not. And this can happen when your car goes through a big puddle and sucks in water into the intake, you hydrolock your car. Same thing will happen with oil if it seeps past the rings. So let's go ahead and pull the spark plug out and see what we got. Well, that's too big and there's not even room for it. All right, I'm actually going to pull the bolts off this lower cowle to see if it gives us some room to work. A bolt up under here, a couple bolts up under here, which of course I can't reach. So if you can see down here, there's these flanges, one here, and one over here that hold this lower part of the cowle on. Gotta get that off to get access to the spark plug. This impact socket barely clears the intake there. 21 millimeter if you're curious. Oh, yeah, as I suspected, you see all the oil coming out? It was a mistake. There was more oil coming out of there than I thought. What I'm going to do now is just turn the motor over vigorously to try to push out some of that fluid. Sometimes you can get this condition when the carburetor float or the pin have gone bad, and it'll just keep it open, so the fuel pump just keeps pumping fuel, or if it's gravity fed, it just keeps seeping into the bowl, and then eventually it'll just start bleeding fuel into here, and then you're leaking a bunch of fuel into your cylinder, and that'll also hydrolock it. In that case, the concern is that the fuel will also seep past the rings the other direction, and it'll fill your crankcase with fuel, so dilute out your oil. And you'd want to change the oil out in that case. In this case, I should probably change the oil out anyways, because it's just been sitting so long, but that might be a job for another time. At the bottom of the acceptable range. So it says 10W30 to 10W40, so got a little bit of this and try to sneak it in there. All right, that looks good. We're full up on oil again. Obviously, I'm going to take a look at the impeller as well before I actually get things going. But we've solved our hydrolock problem. Look at that. That was easy. prolific smoke is from the oil that's left in the cylinder. It'll burn off. I'd like to see a Ninja blender compete with that. Seems to be running great and idling fine, so I think we're ready to go. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time on the Afterwork Garage.